There are moments in life that divide everything into before and after. Moments so violent, not to the body, but to the soul, that they erase who you thought you were and replace you with someone you barely recognize. For me, that moment happened on a cold hospital gurney at 3 in the morning, under fluorescent lights that hummed like insects, while blood pooled beneath my body and soaked through thin white sheets. I was dying. I remember the metallic taste in my mouth, the way the ceiling lights blurred into long white streaks, and the sound of hurried footsteps echoing around me. Nurses shouted numbers I couldn't understand. Someone kept telling me to stay awake. Someone else kept pressing hard on my abdomen, as if trying to hold my life inside me with their bare hands. And then I saw my son. Julian, my only child, the boy I had once rocked to sleep, the man I had sacrificed everything for. When he stepped into the emergency room, dressed in his tailored coat, his posture calm and controlled, I felt relief flood through me so powerfully that it almost masked the pain. I remember thinking, thank God, my son is here. Everything will be okay now. The doctors explained the situation quickly. I didn't catch every word, but I heard enough. Massive internal bleeding, rare blood type, no time. Someone said the words life or death, and I remember squeezing Julian's hand weakly, trusting him the way a mother always does, even at the edge of death. Then the doctor turned to him and asked a simple question. Would you donate blood to save your mother's life? Julian didn't answer right away. He looked at me, not with concern, not with fear, not with love. He looked at me the way one looks at something broken, inconvenient, already written off. And then he spoke. I'd rather die than save a failure like you. The words didn't land all at once. They arrived slowly, like shards of glass, sinking into my chest, one by one. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him, that the blood loss had scrambled my brain, that no son, no human being could say something so cold to a dying mother. But his face didn't change. He meant it. That was the moment my life split in two. For 68 years, I believed I had done everything right. I was not born into wealth. No silver spoons, no family connections, no safety net. I built my life the hard way, brick by brick, deal by deal, sleepless night after sleepless night. I worked 18-hour days for decades, negotiating real estate contracts by day and studying zoning laws by night. I ate cold dinners at my desk and fell asleep with spreadsheets burned into my eyes. And I did it all for one reason. Julian. I wanted my son to have choices I never had. I wanted doors to open for him automatically. I wanted the world to be kinder to him than it had ever been to me. So, I gave him everything. The best private schools on Chicago's North Shore. Tutors. Summer programs. Connections. I paid for his education at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine without blinking, even when the tuition numbers made my stomach tighten. When he graduated, I gifted him something most young doctors could only dream of. His first clinic. I told myself I wasn't spoiling him. I told myself I was investing in a future where my son would save lives, help people, and carry himself with integrity. And for years, I believed it worked. People spoke his name with admiration. Dr. Vance, a cardiovascular surgeon, prestigious, respected, a healer. When people praised him, I felt proud, not of myself, but of him. I told anyone who would listen that my son was a good man, a moral man, a doctor who understood the sacredness of life. That belief was the foundation of my world, and it collapsed in one sentence. The pain didn't begin all at once. For days before that night, there had been small warnings, sharp twinges in my abdomen, a strange pressure I couldn't explain. I dismissed them the way women my age often do. It's just age. It's just stress. It will pass. I had lived my entire life pushing through discomfort. Pain was something you worked around. But that Tuesday night, the pain changed. It became violent, consuming. It wrapped around my torso like a vice and squeezed until I couldn't breathe. When I stood up, the room tilted. When I tried to walk, my legs buckled beneath me. And then I vomited blood. Not streaks, not flecks. Blood. Dark, terrifying, endless. I remember collapsing in the hallway of my condominium building, my vision narrowing. The world fading at the edges. My neighbor, Mr. Peterson, found me unconscious near the elevator. If he had come home 10 minutes later, I would have died there, alone, anonymous, another elderly woman found too late. At the hospital, everything moved quickly, too quickly. Doctors spoke in urgent tones. Machines beeped relentlessly. Someone explained that I had ruptured esophageal varices, something I had never even known existed. My blood pressure plummeted. I was losing blood faster than they could stabilize me. Then came the words that sealed my fate. O negative. Rare. Limited supply. Time running out. The doctor told me they needed to contact compatible relatives immediately. And that's when Julian was called. When Julian arrived, I felt something close to peace. He walked into the emergency room at exactly 4:45 in the morning, composed and professional, like a man who belonged there. I remember thinking how reassuring it was that my son understood medicine, that he knew what was at stake. We shared the same blood type. He had donated for me once before, years ago, during a minor surgery. There was no question in my mind that he would do it again. None. I watched him as the doctor explained the urgency. I saw the nods, the clinical understanding. I waited for him to say yes. Instead, he hesitated. Seconds passed, then more. The doctor pressed him gently. Dr. Vance, we need your answer now. Julian inhaled slowly, and then he destroyed me. When Julian spoke, his voice was calm. Too calm. I'm not donating a single drop of my blood. The room froze. The nurse's mouth fell open. The doctor stared at him as if he were speaking a foreign language. I felt the world tilt again, but this time it wasn't from blood loss. I'd rather die, Julian continued, his eyes fixed on mine, than save a failure like you. Failure. That word echoed louder than the machines, louder than the alarms, louder than my own heartbeat. I wanted to ask him why. I wanted to scream that I had given him everything, that my entire life had been bent around his future. But no words came out. All I could do was stare at the son I no longer recognized. The physical pain became irrelevant. It was distant, secondary. What mattered was this: in my most vulnerable moment, when my life hung by a thread, my son looked at me and chose cruelty. He chose rejection. He chose to let me die. And in that moment, something inside me broke that would never heal. In the morning, that fact alone feels almost ironic now. After Julian's words fell into the sterile air like poison, the doctors no longer looked at him. The nurse turned her back as if ashamed to exist in the same room. Someone pulled a curtain between us, not for privacy, but for mercy. I remember thinking how thin that curtain was, how it couldn't possibly separate a mother from the knowledge that her own child had abandoned her. I drifted in and out of consciousness after that. At some point, another hospital located compatible blood. I was told later it came from a trauma unit at a neighboring hospital, rushed over with police escort. I never met the donor. I don't know their name, but a stranger gave me what my son refused: a chance to live. As the blood entered my veins, warmth spread slowly through my body. My pulse steadied. The alarms softened. Nurses spoke in calmer voices, but something vital did not return. The body stabilized, yes. The heart kept beating. The lungs kept breathing. But the woman I had been, the woman who believed family was unbreakable, that love earned loyalty, was gone. I remember waking fully later that afternoon. The room was quiet. Sunlight filtered through half-closed blinds, casting pale lines across the walls. I should have felt gratitude, relief, triumph over death. Instead, I felt hollow. There is a particular kind of pain that does not scream. It does not bleed. It does not announce itself with drama. It simply settles in your chest and stays there, heavy and unmoving. That pain has a name: betrayal. For 2 days after the transfusion, I said very little. The doctors thought it was weakness. The nurses thought it was shock. Julian, when he briefly returned, thought it was confusion. None of them understood that silence had become my shield. I replayed his words again and again in my mind, as if repetition might dull their edge. It never did. Instead, something else began to form beneath the grief. Something colder, sharper, more dangerous. Clarity. I noticed how Julian spoke around me now. Slowly, carefully, as if addressing a child. I noticed how he and his wife, Caroline, exchanged glances when they thought I wasn't looking. I noticed how often they asked about my finances, my documents, my properties, and then a thought crept in, quiet, unsettling, impossible to ignore. What if my survival was inconvenient for them? That was the moment I made a choice. I would not confront them. I would not accuse them. I would not reveal what I knew. Instead, I would disappear while still breathing. When the doctors said I needed rest, I leaned into it. When they asked questions, I answered vaguely. I let my voice tremble. I let my eyes wander. I let them believe my mind was slipping. Because there is no greater weapon against predators than letting them believe you are weak. Feigning fragility is harder than it sounds. It requires discipline, precision, restraint. Every instinct in my body screamed to stand up, to demand explanations, to look Julian in the eye and ask how he could do this to me, but I didn't. I slurred words on purpose. I repeated myself. I pretended to forget dates, names, even faces. I watched Julian closely as I did. And what I saw chilled me more than his refusal to donate blood. He was relieved, not worried, not ashamed, relieved. Each time I fumbled a sentence or lost my train of thought, his shoulders relaxed just a little. Caroline's voice grew sweeter, softer. They spoke over me, around me, about me, as if I were already gone. One afternoon, I pretended to fall asleep while they sat beside my hospital bed. I slowed my breathing, kept my eyes barely open, watching through my lashes. That was when I heard the truth. "Are you sure she can't hear us?" Caroline whispered. Her voice was low, controlled, but tense, the voice of someone who knows they are standing on the edge of something dangerous. Julian didn't hesitate. "Positive," he said flatly. The doctors confirmed episodes of severe confusion. "They're sedating her heavily." A pause. "She won't remember any of this." Those words hit me harder than his earlier cruelty. She won't remember. As if my memories were already erased. As if I had already ceased to exist as a thinking, feeling human being. Caroline exhaled slowly. "Good, because we can't wait much longer." My heart began to pound, but I forced myself to remain still. "We need to move fast," she continued. "The longer she stays lucid, the higher the risk." "Relax," Julian replied. "I've already spoken to the facility, St. Jude's Senior Living. They can take her next week." Facility. I felt cold spread through my limbs. "And once she's there," Caroline said quietly, "it'll be much easier to establish incompetence." Julian chuckled, a sound I will never forget. "Exactly. Once the paperwork's in place, I'll be appointed legal guardian. Full control. Control. Not care. Not protection. Control." They spoke about my life the way one speaks about an estate sale. "Lincoln Park first," Caroline said. "That building alone could cover most of the debt." "And the lake house," Julian added. "We'll sell it quietly, no attention." "What about the cash?" she asked. Julian's tone turned confident, almost smug. "About 800,000 in liquid assets. Once we establish dementia, the rest is automatic." I lay there, frozen, my body rigid beneath the hospital sheets. Dementia. They were planning to erase me legally, to rewrite my existence on paper, to turn my life's work into their lifeline. "And Chloe?" Caroline asked suddenly, lowering her voice even further. My granddaughter's name cut through me like a blade. Julian scoffed. "She's a kid. What's she going to do? But she's close to her grandmother, Caroline insisted. She might ask questions. That's why we'll send her abroad, Julian said casually. London. My sister can take her. Distance solves everything. Distance solves everything. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the IV from my arm and expose them both. Instead, I lay there, listening as my son discussed removing my granddaughter from my life as easily as moving furniture. When they finally left the room, I lay staring at the ceiling, my heart racing, my hands clenched beneath the sheets. I understood everything now. Julian had not refused to save my life because of anger or impulse. He had refused because my death would have been convenient. Because dead mothers don't fight back. Because dead women don't expose crimes. And in that moment, something inside me hardened. They thought I was fading. They thought I was powerless. They thought wrong. There is a moment after betrayal when grief exhausts itself, not because it heals, but because something stronger replaces it. Mine came sometime around the third night after that conversation. The hospital was quiet in the way only hospitals are after midnight. A soft chorus of beeping monitors, distant footsteps, the rustle of curtains. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word Julian and Caroline had spoken while they thought I was unconscious. Facility, incompetence, control. They hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. They had mapped out the erasure of my existence with professional efficiency. And that was when I understood something essential. They did not see me as a mother anymore. They saw me as an obstacle. So I stopped thinking like a mother. I started thinking like the woman who had built a real estate empire in a city that eats the weak alive. The first step was information. I waited until morning rounds, until the nurse who seemed the least hurried entered my room. Her name badge read Angela. I asked her questions slowly, deliberately, about my medications, my prognosis, my cognitive assessments. She hesitated when she spoke about the evaluations. They're precautionary, she said gently, given your age and the trauma. Of course, I replied, offering a small confused smile. But I filed every word away. Later that day, when Julian arrived, I played my role perfectly. I asked him the same question 3 times. I pretended to forget his name once. I watched satisfaction flicker across his face before he masked it. That flicker told me everything. That evening, after visiting hours ended, I used the hospital phone, not my cell, which I knew Julian monitored, to make a call I hadn't made in years. Michael, I said when the line picked up. It's Eleanor. There was a pause. Then disbelief. Eleanor Vance? He said. I thought. I'm alive, I replied, and I need you. Michael Rhodes had been my corporate attorney for nearly 3 decades before retiring. He knew every ruthless tactic in the book. More importantly, he knew my mind. When I told him everything, slowly, carefully, he did not interrupt. When I finished, he spoke only 6 words. They made a very big mistake. From that point forward, Every breath I took had a purpose. Michael arranged for a private investigator, quiet, discreet, former federal. His name was never spoken aloud in my presence. I was given a number. I memorized it and burned the paper. The investigator's first instruction was simple. Say nothing. Observe everything. That suited me perfectly. I let Julian and Caroline believe their plan was working. I let them schedule meetings with social workers. I let them talk openly in my presence. I let them underestimate me. What they didn't know was that my hospital room, like my home, had security. Years earlier, after a break-in at one of my properties, I had installed discreet audio surveillance in my condominium. When Julian insisted I recover there instead of returning to assisted rehab, I agreed, on the condition that my comfort items be installed. They never questioned the small black device on the shelf. They never imagined it was recording every word. For days, I listened. I listened as Julian discussed falsifying medical documentation with a colleague, someone I recognized from his clinic. I listened as Caroline complained about how long I was taking to die. I listened as they discussed power of attorney documents, trust amendments, offshore accounts. Each recording was time-stamped. Each file duplicated and encrypted. Every word they spoke tightened the noose they were weaving around themselves. And still, I waited. Because patience had always been my greatest weapon. The investigator's first report arrived 3 weeks later. Michael came to see me in person, carrying a slim black folder. He did not smile. That alone told me what I was about to learn would change everything. What I'm going to tell you, he said quietly, goes beyond elder abuse. He opened the folder. Inside were names, dates, settlements. Julian's clinic, my gift to him, had a history. Not a public one, a buried one. There were malpractice claims quietly settled out of court. Elderly patients who had undergone unnecessary procedures. Families paid off with non-disclosure agreements. Medical records altered after the fact. This isn't incompetence, Michael said grimly. It's systematic. The investigator had also uncovered something worse. A pattern. Julian targeted patients without strong advocates. Widows, retirees, immigrants. People unlikely to question a surgeon's authority. Procedures billed at inflated rates. Complications blamed on age. Lives damaged. Some ended. My hands trembled as I turned the pages. The son I had raised wasn't just corrupt. He was dangerous. In that moment, the last remnants of denial died. This was no longer about betrayal. This was about stopping him. Once I understood the full scope of what Julian had done, I moved swiftly. Michael initiated a financial lockdown. Accounts frozen. Transfer permissions revoked. New trustees appointed. Quietly, legally, irrevocably. I contacted my banks personally. I am not incapacitated, I said clearly, firmly, on recorded lines. Any attempt to act on my behalf without my written consent is fraudulent. The tone of the conversations changed immediately. Julian's attempt to file preliminary guardianship paperwork was halted within 48 hours. His forged medical opinion, signed by a colleague, was flagged and escalated. The colleague panicked. He cooperated. By the time Julian realized something was wrong, the ground beneath his feet was already cracking. He came to see me that evening, frustration poorly concealed. "Mom," he said, forcing a smile, "there's been a mix-up at the bank." I looked at him blankly. "The bank?" "Yes," he said slowly. "They said they can't process." "Oh," I interrupted gently. I must have forgotten. The lie slid off my tongue effortlessly. For the first time, doubt crossed his face. The final step required precision. Michael advised patience, but I had already decided. Predators confess when they believe victory is assured. So I gave Julian exactly what he wanted: control. I told him I wanted to discuss my will. His reaction was immediate. Concern replaced by eagerness. He brought Caroline the next evening. Both of them dressed carefully, somber, respectful, rehearsed. I sat in my armchair, wrapped in a shawl, my posture deliberately frail. "I don't want to be a burden," I said softly. "I want to make things easier for you." Julian took my hand. "Of course, Mom," he said. "We just want what's best for you." I nodded. "And I think," I continued, "it's time to give you power of attorney." Caroline inhaled sharply. Julian squeezed my hand tighter. "That's a big decision," he said, trying and failing to sound calm. "I trust you," I whispered. That was when they began to speak freely. They talked about consolidating assets, about selling properties, about managing my care efficiently. They talked too much. Every word was captured. Every sentence sealed their fate. When they finished, Julian leaned back, victorious. "That was the right choice," he said. I smiled and reached for the remote. The curtains opened, the cameras blinked red, and the door behind them opened, not to another room, but to the end of their lives as they knew them. The silence after the curtains opened was not dramatic. There was no shouting, no sudden movement, no gasp worthy of cinema. Just a long, suffocating stillness. Julian was the first to turn around. His eyes went to the cameras, small, unobtrusive, blinking red like patient witnesses. Then to Michael, standing near the doorway, with 2 uniformed officers behind him. Then back to me. For a fleeting second, I saw something human cross his face. Fear. "Mom," he began. I did not answer. I had learned, finally, that silence was more powerful than any speech I could give him. Caroline stood slowly, her hand flying to her mouth. "This is illegal," she said immediately, defaulting to outrage the way some people default to prayer. "You can't record us without—" "You were recorded in your own home," Michael said calmly, "which you entered voluntarily. Every device was installed legally years ago." Julian took a step toward me. "Turn them off," he hissed. "Now." I looked at him the way one looks at a stranger who has spoken too familiarly. "No," I said. The word felt clean. Finished. The officers stepped forward. "Dr. Julian Vance," one said evenly. You are being detained, pending investigation into fraud, elder abuse, medical malpractice, and conspiracy. Caroline began to cry, not the broken sobs of remorse, but sharp, panicked sounds, like an animal realizing the trap has closed. Julian didn't cry. He stared at me, stunned, as if still trying to locate the mother who would protect him from consequences. She planned this, he said to the officers, his voice shaking with disbelief. She's confused. She doesn't know what she's doing. Michael handed them a folder. Medical evaluations from 3 independent neurologists, he said, all conducted within the last 10 days. She is fully competent. That was the moment Julian's composure shattered. He lunged toward me, stopping just short when the officer's hand went to his weapon. You did this to me, he whispered, venomous, after everything I've done for you. I met his gaze. No, I said quietly. I finally stopped letting you do this to me. They led him out in handcuffs. I did not watch. The story broke 2 days later. At first, it was a whisper, an internal investigation at a private clinic. Then, a headline. Then, a flood. Prominent Chicago surgeon under investigation for elder abuse and fraud. Reporters camped outside the building. News vans lined the street. Commentators speculated with practiced seriousness, using words like alleged and shocking and unthinkable. They used my son's name over and over again. I turned off the television. I had no interest in watching strangers dissect what I had already buried. Michael handled everything. Statements, court filings, media containment. He advised me not to speak publicly. You don't owe the world your pain, he said. And for the first time in weeks, I slept. Julian's medical license was suspended within 72 hours. His clinic was shut down pending review. Patients came forward, more than anyone expected. Some with tears, some with anger, some with quiet resignation. The lawsuits multiplied. Caroline's involvement surfaced soon after. Financial transfers, shell accounts, her legal background, once her shield, became evidence of intent. They were no longer a family with a troubled matriarch. They were co-defendants. Through all of it, there was one name no reporter mentioned. Chloe, my granddaughter. She was 13 when everything collapsed. Old enough to understand fear, too young to understand cruelty. She came to see me one evening, escorted by a court-appointed social worker. She stood in my doorway uncertainly, her backpack clutched tightly to her chest. "Grandma?" she asked softly. I opened my arms. She ran into them. She cried the way children cry when they finally feel safe. Hard, gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep and unguarded. I held her and said nothing. There are no words that help in moments like that. Only presence. The court granted me temporary guardianship within a week. Chloe moved into the spare bedroom. I found her staring at the walls at night, listening for a father who would never come home. She asked me once, her voice small, "Is my dad a bad person?" I chose my words carefully. "He made terrible choices," I said, "and those choices hurt people." She nodded, absorbing this like a stone dropped into still water. "Does that mean I will too?" I pulled her closer. No, I said firmly. It means you know what not to become. Julian called me from jail 3 weeks after his arrest. I let it ring. Then I let it ring again. When I finally answered, I did not speak. "Mom," he said hoarsely, "please." I closed my eyes. "I didn't think it would go this far," he continued. "I just needed time. Things got out of control. Out of control. As if this had all been an accident." "They're offering a deal," he said quickly. "But I need help. I need you to talk to Michael, to the prosecutor. You still have influence." I pictured him alone in that cell, stripped of status, stripped of authority, reduced to a number. And I felt nothing resembling satisfaction, only clarity. "I won't interfere," I said. There was silence on the line. "I'm your son," he whispered. "Yes," I replied. "And I was your mother, when that mattered." The call ended. He called again the next week, and the week after that. I did not answer again. Life does not return to normal after something like this. It rearranges itself, slowly, quietly, around what remains. The properties stayed. The money stayed. The empire I built remained intact, but it felt different now. Smaller. Less important. What mattered was the rhythm of mornings with Chloe. Breakfast conversations. Homework spread across the dining table. Her laughter returning. Cautiously at first, then freely. One evening, months later, she asked me if she could become a doctor someday. The question startled me. "Why?" I asked gently. "Because," she said after a moment, "I want to fix things, not break them." I smiled then, not because the past had healed, but because the future had opened. Some legacies are inherited, others are chosen. And in the quiet that followed betrayal, exposure, and loss, I finally understood something that had taken me a lifetime to learn. Family is not defined by blood. It is defined by who stands with you when the truth costs everything. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, but in feeling. The kind of cold that strips away illusion and leaves only facts behind. Wood polished by decades of verdicts. Flags standing stiff and silent. The seal of the court looming overhead like an unblinking eye. Julian sat at the defense table in a suit that no longer fit him. Not because it was the wrong size, but because he no longer belonged inside it. The man who once moved through hospitals with authority now kept his hands folded tightly, knuckles white, shoulders hunched. He did not look at me when I entered. Caroline did. Her gaze held something close to resentment, as if I were an unexpected witness to a story she had already rehearsed differently in her mind. The prosecutor spoke for nearly an hour. Fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy, medical malpractice. Each word landed with a dull finality, supported by evidence so thorough there was no room left for denial. Recordings, financial trails, testimonies from former patients and employees, expert witnesses who dismantled every excuse Julian's defense attempted to raise. When it was time for the plea, Julian stood. His voice shook. not with remorse, but with fear. He pled guilty. So did Caroline. There was no dramatic apology, no speech directed at me, no acknowledgement of what had been lost beyond their freedom. The judge listened impassively, then delivered the sentence: prison time. Permanent revocation of Julian's medical license. Restitution to victims. Probation and disbarment for Caroline. When the gavel came down, it sounded smaller than I expected, like the closing of a door. There were no cheers when it was over. No sense of victory. People often imagine justice as something loud, an eruption of relief, a surge of righteousness. But justice, I learned, is quiet. It leaves you alone with the truth and asks what you plan to do with it. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. I did not stop. Michael shielded me with his body as we walked to the car. Inside, the city moved on around us. Cars honking, pedestrians laughing, life continuing with casual indifference. That night I sat alone in my living room, long after Chloe had gone to bed. I thought I would feel lighter. Instead, I felt older. Justice does not give back what was taken. It does not resurrect the mother-son relationship that died on a hospital gurney. It does not return innocence. It only draws a line and says, "This is as far as the damage goes, and perhaps that is enough." 3 years passed. Time is strange after catastrophe. Some days feel endless, others disappear without warning. The sharpness of pain dulls, not because it heals, but because the mind learns where not to press. Julian aged quickly. I saw it once, in a photo someone forwarded me, without thinking. His hair had thinned, his posture sagged. The arrogance that once defined him had nowhere to live anymore. He worked in the prison library now. That was the irony that stayed with me. The man who once held lives in his hands, now shelving books for minimum wage. He wrote me letters. At first, they were angry, then defensive, then pleading. Eventually, they became quieter. "I know I can't undo what I did," one read, "but I want you to know I think about it every day." I never wrote back, not out of cruelty, out of honesty. Some bridges, once burned, leave nothing solid enough to stand on again. People asked me, friends, acquaintances, even strangers, if I would ever forgive him. They asked it gently, as if forgiveness were medicine that could ease what had happened. I told them the truth. Forgiveness is not reconciliation. I let go of hatred because carrying it would have poisoned what little peace I had left. I no longer replay his words at the hospital. I no longer wake in the night with my heart racing. But forgiveness does not require access. It does not require trust. It does not require a place at the table. Julian lost that when he chose power over humanity. Mercy, I learned, is sometimes simply the refusal to seek revenge beyond justice. And I had already done that. Chloe is grown now, or nearly. She walks through the world with a seriousness that comes from having seen too much too young, but also with a compassion that surprises me every day. She volunteers. She studies relentlessly. She asks questions, not just about how things work, but about why they matter. One evening, as we sat on the balcony watching the city lights flicker on, she said something that stopped me cold. I think people don't become monsters all at once. She said thoughtfully, I think they just make small choices they never stop to question. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something profound. The legacy I left behind was not the buildings with my name on them, not the accounts, not the empire. It was this: a human being who understood accountability. A young woman who knew that love without integrity is not love at all. When I am gone, Julian's name will fade. His reputation already has. History will reduce him to a cautionary footnote. But Chloe will continue. And through her, something clean and honest will remain. That is the ending I chose. Not revenge, not bitterness, but truth, carried forward by someone who knows its cost.